Roger said how glad he is to be in a United Church that doesn't subscribe to that idea that if you're suffering, you've done something wrong. I want to tell you about a book that is written by Kate Bowler. And Kate is a 35-year-old professor of theology at Duke University. And she has a husband that she's been involved with since she was 14 years old. And they together have a young child. And she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. At this time in her life when her career was really solid and her family life was exactly what she wanted. And she had become recognized for a book that she had just written that had to do with the prosperity gospel that exists in the U.S. And she thinks of it as kind of an indigenous to U.S. Belief system. But as I listen to it, I think that it has kind of made its way sometimes across the border up to Canada. So this prosperity gospel says that you can have anything you want if you just work hard enough. If your life isn't going the way you want it, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That we are agents of our own destiny. There's a kind of rugged individualism. Now that feeds into what's known as the American dream. You can be anything you want to be. You can become president if you work hard enough. And people cling on to that. And so even if it's not happening in their lives, they cling on to that dream that it's possible. Because what Kate Bowler discovered as she researched this prosperity gospel is that in the human spirit, we really do want to feel like we have some control over our lives. We want to believe that if things aren't going the way we want them to go, that we have the capacity and the agency to turn stuff around. Kate Bowler said that she didn't buy into that thinking, or she didn't think she bought into that thinking until she became ill. And then she discovered that some of that thinking had permeated into her life. And so, as a writer, what would she do? She started to write. But she started to write as a way to explore the deep, hard truths of her life. The name of her book is Everything Happens for a Reason, and Other Lies I Love. when she became diagnosed and discovered that actually she had just lived with a certain certainty, a certain confidence, that her life would go the way she wanted it to, with this wonderful husband and beautiful child, and she could just imagine growing old in these circumstances, gaining recognition. She would be a busy professional woman, a wife, a doting mother, and her life would be active for a while, and then she would reap the benefits of all that. And she didn't know that she had this confidence, certainty about how her life would go until she heard the news that it probably wasn't going to go the way she expected. And what she had to deal with was, how do you let go of the confidence that you're in charge of your life? It's often when we come to a place of suffering, mentally, emotionally, physically, when we're pushed to the limits, that we actually are confronted with, do the underlying beliefs that we have about our lives and about how our lives should go, are they really the beliefs and the values that can see us through a period of suffering, through a period of deep disappointment? In the book of Acts, and we read, I'm sure you all recognize the same passages as we read last week. The book of Acts tells us that the people of the early church, there was a lot of suffering. There was a lot of disruption. People were martyred, people were killed, people were beaten, because they dared to think differently than what was at that time the mainstream. Kate Bowler said that she discovered that she had to find a new bedrock way of looking at life. Because what she had been imagining was a lie. And so she had to find out what her truth was. And one of the things she found is that she was less critical of, still critical, but less critical, as she understood differently the undergirdings of the prosperity theology. Because she realized that although it had got mixed up with riches and wealth and all that stuff, she came to see that it is a very basic human quality to want a guarantee. You know, the kids this morning? Did you hear them? Like, what do you think? Like, what about in dealing with grandparents and that? Well, they know that grandparents are going to die before them. Right? It's a certainty that they already have. It's not always true, is it? We want a guarantee. We want to have a sense that we're so special to God that if something was going to happen to us, that somehow we'd be made an exception. That all these bad things that happen to other folks won't happen to us, especially if we're people of faith. So she started to really explore, and she said, she started with the question, if I can't have guarantees for my life, then what can I have? And what she came up with, and Roger helped us with this, she came up with, it's kind of layered what you can have. Because hope takes different shapes for different people. She came up with, there's a different sense of time for her that she had to learn how to live into. She had to learn how to be present in a different way. And that rather than imagining what the future would be, what university your son might go to, all these things that we find ourselves thinking about, she brought herself back and said, today at 8:30 in the morning, I'm feeling pretty good. How do I want to use this time when I'm feeling pretty good? And so she found out that she slowed her life down a lot. It wasn't such a big thing that her son dawdled over his eating, because she was in no hurry. She was relishing that moment that they could be together. She tried to bring herself to a place of alertness and awareness. She also had to really come to grips with it wasn't her fault. She hadn't done something bad. That actually suffering, disappointment, tragedy is a part of the human experience. And it happens to us. And one of the things she had to start to protect herself from was people who looked for the reasons. You didn't eat enough avocados. I watched a YouTube, and there's something that you can do about that. And she came to recognize that our desire to give advice, our desire to say, well, try this, although it came out of deep caring, it also came out of the other person's desire to feel like they had some control. Because often, if they thought they hadn't eaten enough avocados, that person themselves ate a lot of avocados. And they felt like, I still have my guarantee in place. And what she discovered is that we don't know how to be. Just be with our own weaknesses. How to be with our own shortcomings, our own suffering, our own tragedy. That's what she's been practicing ever since. Slowing down her life, writing, but using it as a chance to mine her thoughts. She wrote the book because she wanted to say to people, you don't have to rush in and make it better, because actually, folks, you can't. She loves being with her family. You've heard that already. She loves exploring with her mind. She has a list of, in her book, and I'm not going to give you them all, but she has a list of things don't say to people. I want to tell you it's a really great thing that Betty Ann does the pastoral care here, because I was bad in just about every department. But one of the things is, she says, people would come to her and they would look at her and they would say, like, how are you? How are you really? And what she had to do in her head was to do the translation. This person is saying they care about me. Because she encouraged us in her book, encouraged people not to do that. Because she said, imagine the very worst thing that's ever happened to you. And once you have that in your head, think about trying to sum up what happened to you in 2 or 3 sentences. And then saying it out loud 25 times a day when all these people ask you. She said, like, she can't go there. And she can recognize the caring, but she has to translate it. And so they said, like, well, what is helpful? And she said, if there's something that's happening that could make me laugh, I love to laugh. If you know what my favorite TV show is, and there was a particularly good episode, say, hey, That was a pretty good show the other night, eh? Because she said the intensity that happens, that people bring to you when you've become ill, is unlike the intensity that they would bring to you if you were not ill. And she said, like, sometimes she just wants to be like an ordinary person, not a person who's defined as a very ill person. So she wants normal conversation. There are moments, of course, she said, when she feels like talking about, and then she's pleased for someone to be an open-hearted listener. But there's times she's just trying to get through the day. And a little bit of lightness, a little bit of a reminder that she's still living, are things that help. Well, I say it every week, I know, and you're getting tired of me repeating myself, but this is the last one on the book of Acts. But I think that our time as church bears something relationship to the early church. Our issues are different, but for us to learn how to be present with those who suffer without giving advice, without watching YouTubes about their condition, without having in the back of our heads, I wonder what they did wrong. If we can just learn to sit with suffering, our own and others, and to be positive, to be encouraging, but to know we're not in charge. Our lives and the life of every other human being is a fragile thing. And somehow, let's practice together the giving up our need to think that we're in charge, and to invest ourselves in the things that matter. Well, thank you very much for listening. It has been a great series on the book of Acts, and I've enjoyed it tremendously, and I hope that you have. Amen.